I sent one photo to our family group chat. My 7-year-old daughter, pale after emergency surgery. She keeps asking for her mom. I wrote. My wife replied, I'm at dinner. Handle it. My mother-in-law added, she's alive. Stop making her everyone's problem. I typed only 3 words. I understand. Thanks. At 9:47 p.m., the phone call they received left them frozen in silence. But before I begin, please like and subscribe to the channel. And we'd love to hear which part of the world are you joining us from. Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. The house was cold at 4 in the morning. It always was. Grady Vandermeier had lived in it for 11 years and had never once fixed the draft that came up through the floorboards in the hallway, because his father had never fixed it either, and there were some things a man kept out of stubbornness rather than sense. He woke because of a sound, not a loud one, a small wet cough from down the hall, followed by nothing. It was the nothing that got him out of bed. The floor bit his feet. He walked the 11 steps to his daughter's room without turning on a light, because he knew the distance, because he had walked it 140 times in the last 14 months. Her bed was empty. The blanket had been pushed back in a hurry, folded over on itself like something that had been left in a rush. The bathroom door was open 2 inches. A strip of pale light lay across the hallway carpet. Junie? No answer. He pushed the door. His daughter was on the tile between the tub and the sink. She was on her side with one arm folded under her cheek, the way she slept when she was healthy. Her lips were gray. Her hair was stuck to her forehead in dark strings, and her skin had the color of paper that had been left in a window too long. Grady went down on his knees, so hard the tile cracked something in his kneecap, and he did not feel it for 3 days. Hey, bug. Junie. He put 2 fingers under her jaw. There was a pulse. It was fast and light and wrong, like a bird trapped inside a wall. Dad, she said. Her eyes did not open. It's cold. I know. I've got you. Don't turn the light on. I won't. He gathered her up. She weighed nothing. That was the thing that had been happening slowly, so slowly he had let himself explain it away. She had been 51 pounds in October. She was 43 now. Every doctor had a phrase for it. Failure to thrive. Idiopathic presentation. Unexplained metabolic instability. Words that were really just a shrug wearing a lab coat. As he lifted her, his knee pushed something across the floor. It was her notebook. The green one with the bent corner. It had fallen open to yesterday's page, and yesterday's page was colored in green pencil, edge to edge, a solid block of it. She had a system. Green for good days, orange for bad ones. She had been doing it since she was 5, ever since a nurse in Traverse City told her that keeping track of things helped doctors help you faster. Grady stood in his cold bathroom with his daughter in his arms and looked down at a green page. Yesterday had been a good day. She had eaten a bowl of chicken and rice at 7. She had watched half a movie. She had laughed at something on the television and then apologized for laughing too loud, the way she always did, as if joy were a thing she had to ration. A good day. And now this. Something moved inside him then. Not panic. Panic he knew. Panic he had felt in October and again in December and twice in January. This was different. This was quieter than panic and much colder. It settled behind his ribs like a stone dropped into deep water, going down and not hitting bottom. He carried her out to the truck. The February air came off Torch Lake in a solid sheet, so cold it made the inside of his nose sting. Snow squeaked under his boots. The orchard stretched out behind the house in black rows. 300 acres of cherry trees standing bare and patient in the dark, waiting for a spring they had no doubt about. He buckled Junie into the back seat and put her rabbit under her arm. The rabbit was named Pepper. He was gray, or he had been gray once, and one of his ears had been restitched 4 times. Grady had done 3 of those repairs himself, at the kitchen table, at midnight, with a needle he could barely thread. He was better at it now than he had been. Pepper's here, he said. Okay, Junie whispered. He turned the heat to full and drove. Alden, Michigan, at 4 in the morning, is 900 people and 1 blinking traffic light. He went past the marina with its boats shrink-wrapped in white plastic. He went past the church, past the hardware store his father had bought nails from for 40 years, and out onto the county road where the trees leaned in and the dark got serious. He watched her in the mirror at every straight stretch. Junie, say something. Something. Again in a minute. Dad. Yeah. Is Mom home? Grady's hands did not move on the wheel. That was the whole tell, and there was no one in the truck old enough to read it. Not yet, he said. Okay. She said it like she already knew. She said it the way you agree with a weather report. He drove 40 minutes to Traverse City with his daughter dying quietly in the back seat, and he thought about a green page, and the stone kept going down. They took her through the doors at 5:12. After that, Grady's job was to sit. The waiting room at Munson Medical Center had gray chairs bolted together in rows of 4, a television near the ceiling playing a cooking show with the sound off, and a vending machine that hummed at a pitch just high enough to hear. The air smelled like floor cleaner and old coffee and something faintly metallic underneath. He sat with his elbows on his knees and his hands laced together, and he did not move for 2 hours. He called Dessa at 5:20. It rang 5 times and went to voicemail, and her recorded voice came on warm and bright, the voice she used with resort guests. It's me. Junie's at Munson. It's bad. Call me. He called again at 5:41, and at 6:15, and at 6:52. He called Corinne at 6:55. Voicemail. He did not leave a message on that one. At 7:30 a.m., nurse came out and told him she was in surgery. At 8:10, another nurse came out and told him it was going long. At 9:45, the doors opened, and a woman in scrubs walked toward him with her cap still on and her mask pulled down under her chin. Mr. Vandermeer? He stood up too fast, and the room tipped for a second. I'm Karen Halvorsen. Pediatric surgery. She did not smile. He appreciated that more than he could have said. She's alive. She's in recovery. She's going to stay alive. Grady sat back down because his legs made the choice for him. Halvorsen sat in the chair across from him, which surgeons do not usually do. She was maybe 50, with short gray blonde hair pressed flat by the cap and deep lines around her eyes. Her hands were red from washing. Her bowel telescope, she said. One section slid inside another, like a sock turning itself inside out. It cut off blood supply. The tissue died. I took out about 11 inches. 11 inches. She'll be fine without it. People live full lives with less. But I want you to hear the next part clearly. She leaned forward, forearms on her knees, mirroring him. You brought her in around 5. If you had brought her in at 7, I would be having a different conversation with you. Maybe 90 minutes of margin. Maybe less. The room hummed. She was fine yesterday, Grady said. Define fine. She ate. She laughed at a movie. It was a good day. Halvorsen was quiet for a moment. She had a way of being quiet that felt like she was doing arithmetic behind her eyes. Mr. Vandermeer, I looked at her history while my team was closing. 14 months. 9 emergency visits at 3 different facilities. Potassium levels that swing without explanation. Weight loss with no malabsorption findings. 2 admissions where she improved dramatically within 36 hours of being in a hospital bed. She paused. Do you know what that last part means? No. It means she gets better when she's here. Halvorsen let it sit. I have to ask you a question, and I need you to hear it as a question and not an accusation. Has anyone been giving her anything at home? Her medication. What you people prescribed. Anything else. Over the counter. Supplements. Something for the stomach. Something a family member swore by. Anything at all. No. You're certain. I'm certain about what I give her. It came out of his mouth before he had decided to say it. He heard it land. He heard the shape of the hole in it. Halvorsen heard it too. She did not react. She just held his eyes for 1 beat longer than a person normally holds another person's eyes. And in that beat, something passed between them that neither of them said out loud. I've ordered a full toxicology panel, she said. Comprehensive. Not the standard emergency screen. Is that routine? No. Then why? Because I've been doing this for 22 years. She stood and pulled the cap off her head. And because I'm not going to explain my reasoning to you in a hallway when I might be wrong. If I'm wrong, I've made you distrust your own family for no reason. If I'm right, you'll know soon enough. She started to walk away. Then she turned. Mr. Vandermeer. Who else has access to her food and her medicine? Grady looked at the floor tiles. There were 4 of them between his boots, and one had a scuff shaped like the state of Ohio. My wife, he said. Her mother. Sometimes my brother-in-law. All right. That's it. That's the whole list. All right, Halvorsen said again, and this time it sounded less like agreement and more like a note being written down. She went through the doors. Grady sat back down in the gray chair. The cooking show played on with no sound. A man on the screen was folding something into a bowl and laughing at nothing. He took out his phone and looked at his call log. 4 calls to Dessa, 1 to Corinne, all outgoing, nothing coming back. It was 9:58 in the morning. His daughter had been dying for 14 months, 1 green page and 1 orange page at a time, and a woman he had met an hour ago had just asked him a question that his own wife had never once asked. He put the phone in his pocket and waited to be allowed to see his kid. They let him into her room at 11:40. Room 412 was on the 4th floor, pediatric surgical. Someone had put a decal of a cartoon whale on the wall across from the bed. The whale was smiling. Grady would come to hate that whale over the next 6 days with a purity he had never felt toward anything. Junie was small in the bed. There was a tube taped to her cheek and a line in the back of her hand and a monitor beside her that made a soft, regular click like a clock that had learned to be polite about it. Someone had put pepper on the pillow next to her head. Grady would find out later it was a nurse named Dolores who had done that, and he would remember her name for the rest of his life. He pulled a chair to the bed and sat down and did not talk. He watched the numbers change on the screen. 96, 97, 96. The afternoon went by in pieces. A resident came. A nurse came. The light through the window turned from white to yellow to a thin blue. At 7:20 that evening, Junie's eyes came open. It lasted maybe 90 seconds. She looked at the ceiling first, then at the whale, then slowly at him. Hey, bug. Her lips moved. Nothing came out. He leaned in. Try again. Take your time. Is Mom coming? There it was again. It had been the first thing she asked in the truck, and it was the first thing she asked now, and Grady understood in that second, with a clarity that felt like cold water going down his throat, that his daughter had been asking that question her whole life and had never once gotten a yes. I'm working on it, he said. Her hand moved on the blanket. He put his thumb into it, and she closed her fingers around it, weakly, the way she had when she was 4 days old, and he had been terrified of breaking her. Tell her I'm okay, Junie said. So, she doesn't worry. And then she was asleep again. Grady sat there with his thumb in his daughter's fist for 11 minutes without moving. Then he took out his phone and took 1 picture. He was not a man who took pictures. There were maybe 40 photographs on his phone, and 30 of them were of equipment or receipts. But he took this one, and when he looked at it afterward, it was worse than looking at her directly, because a photograph holds still and lets you see all of it at once. The gray under her eyes. The tape. The tube. The rabbit with the crooked ear. He opened the family group chat. There were 11 people in it. Dessa, Corinne, Ansel, 2 cousins downstate, an aunt in Kalamazoo, a few others. It was called Kirchner Crew, and it had been named by someone in 2019, and nobody had ever changed it. Most of the traffic was birthday reminders and photos of somebody's boat. He attached the picture. He typed 6 words. She keeps asking for her mom. He sent it at 7:31. The read receipts came up almost immediately. 2, then 5, then 9, then all 11. He watched the little icons stack up along the bottom of the screen, one after another, 11 people in 3 states looking at a photograph of a 7-year-old with a tube taped to her face. The 3 dots appeared under Dessa's name. They pulsed. They stopped. They started again. At 7:34, her reply landed. I'm at dinner. Handle it. Grady read it 4 times. He read it the way you read a sign in a language you almost know, hunting for the meaning you must have missed. He looked for a follow-up. He looked for the second message, the one that would say she was leaving now, the one that would say which restaurant, the one that would say anything. It did not come. At 7:36, Corinne's did. She's alive. Stop making her everyone's problem. The room went very still. The monitor clicked. The heating vent breathed. Down the hall, someone laughed at a nurse's station, a short bright sound that had nothing to do with anything. Grady looked at the screen and waited, because there were 9 other people in that chat. 9 adults. 2 of them were nurses. 1 was a schoolteacher. 1 had held Junie at her baptism and cried about it. Nobody typed. The 3 dots did not appear under a single other name. Not one. 11 people had opened a photograph of a child in a hospital bed, and 2 of them had said those 2 things, and 9 of them had read those 2 things and gone back to their evenings. The silence in that chat was the loudest thing Grady had ever heard. Then, at 7:39, 1 line of small gray text appeared at the bottom of the screen. Ansel Kirchner left the conversation. Grady looked at that for a long moment. He did not know what to do with it. He filed it the way he filed a broken irrigation valve in October, something to come back to when there was time. He set the phone on his knee. Here's what he felt. He did not feel rage. He had expected rage, if he had ever thought about it, and he waited for it politely, the way you wait for a train. It did not arrive. What he felt instead was something clarifying, like a lens turning, like a window being washed after 20 years, and the view outside being exactly the same as it always was, and being able to see it properly for the first time. He thought about the last 11 years. He thought about Dessa saying, at every single family dinner, some version of the same sentence. I've been up since 4 with her. I'm running on fumes. He thought about how she said it out loud, to a room, always to a room, and how he had never once come home and found her tired. He thought about the notes in Junie's school folder, always in his handwriting. The dentist appointments, always his truck in the parking lot. The way Dessa used the word we when she meant I, and the word you when she meant your fault. He thought about Corinne at Thanksgiving, holding Junie's chin and saying to the table, "Isn't she pale?" and everyone agreeing, and no one asking why. He thought about the words on his screen. She's alive. Not she's okay. Not thank God. She's alive. The way you talk about a business that had survived a bad quarter. And he thought about Dr. Halvorson's question. Has anyone been giving her anything at home? Grady picked up the phone. He typed a long message. Every word of it was true, and every word of it was useless. He looked at it for 30 seconds. Then he held down the delete key and watched 11 years go backward across the screen until the box was empty. He typed 3 words instead. I understand. Thanks. He sent it at 7:44 p.m. 40 miles away, in a restaurant on the bay in Traverse City. Dessa Kirchner felt her phone buzz on the tablecloth. She turned it over with 1 finger, read the 3 words, and let out a small breath through her nose. She turned to her mother and said, "He's fine. He's over it." And she went back to her wine. She had known Grady Vandermeier for 13 years, and she had never once understood him. And that was the single most expensive fact of her life. At 8 p.m., Grady Vandermeier went to work. He did not go home. He did not cry in a stairwell. He sat in a molded plastic chair beside his sleeping daughter with a phone at 4% battery, borrowed a charger from the nurse's station, and started pulling threads. The first thing he did was walk down to the surgical desk and ask for Dr. Halvorson. She came out 15 minutes later, still in scrubs, eating a granola bar she had clearly been eating for an hour. Is she all right? She's fine. I need something from you. Halvorson waited. The question you asked me this morning, about whether anyone was giving her anything. Grady kept his voice low and level. I want it in the chart. Your question, your reasoning, your order for the toxicology panel, and the time you made the decision. In writing. Tonight. Halvorson stopped chewing. That's an unusual request. It is. Do you want to tell me why? No, Grady said. You wouldn't explain your reasoning to me in a hallway. I'm not going to explain mine. Something almost like a smile crossed her face and did not stay. It's already in the chart, she said. Timed and signed. It went in at 9:31 this morning. Thank you, Mr. Vandermeer. She crumpled the wrapper in her fist. The panel takes about 30 hours for the full send-out. If something comes back that requires action, I don't have a choice about what happens next. There are laws. I want you to understand that before it happens, not after. I understand. People say that, and then they're surprised. I won't be surprised. She looked at him for a second, the same way she had that morning. No, she said. I don't think you will. He went back to room 412 and sat down and opened the pharmacy app on his phone. It was there because Grady handled the family insurance. He handled the insurance because he handled everything with a number attached to it. It was an old joke in the marriage back when there were jokes. Dessa said she couldn't balance a checkbook, and he said good, and that was the whole arrangement. He logged in and pulled the prescription history for Junie's card. 14 months. The screen filled with entries. Her regular medication was there, filled at the pharmacy in Alden monthly, exactly as expected. And underneath it were 2 other prescriptions. Neither one was a drug Grady had ever heard of. Neither one had ever come into his house in a bag he had carried. And both had been filled twice a month for 14 months at a chain pharmacy in Belair, 12 miles from Alden, in the opposite direction from every Dr. Junie had ever seen. Picked up by an authorized adult. Not him. Grady set the phone down on his knee. He looked at the whale on the wall. He looked at his daughter's face in the blue glow of the monitor. Then he picked the phone back up and kept going. Second thread. Money. He opened the ledger app that mirrored the joint checking account. Grady kept the Orchard's books by hand, in green cloth ledgers in a locked drawer, because his father had, and because he had learned young that a man who writes his own numbers is harder to lie to. But the household account was electronic, and he reconciled it every second Sunday, and he was good at it, and that was how he found the thing he had been walking past for 14 months. A recurring payment. $61. Monthly. Same date. The description was an abbreviation, 11 characters of nothing. He had assumed it was a streaming bundle. He had assumed it 4 times, in 4 different reconciliations, and moved on. He looked it up. It was a life insurance premium. Grady stood up. He walked to the window of room 412 and stood there with his hand flat against the cold glass and looked down at the parking structure and the strings of headlights moving along 6th Street. 14 months of pharmacy pickups. 14 months of premiums. 14 months of a little girl coloring pages orange. It was not grief that arrived then. Grief is loud, and it takes over the body. This was the opposite. It was a kind of terrible organization, like standing in a room that had been cluttered his whole life and watching every object slide, all at once, into its correct place. He thought, someone has been doing this to my child for over a year. And then he thought, and this was the moment that decided everything that followed, and I am the only person on earth who knows it right now. That was an advantage. It was in fact the only advantage he had. He was not going to waste it on a phone call. At 9:12 p.m., he called a woman named Nadia Brissett at her home in Belair. He had known Nadia for 6 years, since she wrote the easements when the Orchard expanded onto the Lindstrom parcel. Before private practice, she had been an assistant prosecutor in Antrim County for 9 years. She had a voice like someone reading a fuel gauge. Grady, it's after 9. I know. What happened? He told her. He told it in order, without adjectives, in about 4 minutes. The bathroom floor. The surgery. The 11 inches. The question Halvorson asked. The prescriptions in Belair under a name that was not his. The $61 a month. He did not tell her about the group chat. That felt, oddly, like the private part. When he finished, there was a pause long enough that he checked the screen to see if the call had dropped. Grady, Nadia said. Listen to me very carefully. Go. Do not confront anyone. Not your wife. Not her mother. Not anybody. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Why? Because the second they know you know, everything you need disappears. Prescriptions get canceled. Policies get changed. Phones get factory reset. Right now you are the only person in this story who is holding a full hand, and the way people lose is by showing it too early. Her chair creaked. Second thing, do not delete anything. Not an email, not a text, not a voicemail, not a browser tab. Nothing. Even things that make you look bad. Especially those. All right. Third, screenshot everything you just described to me tonight before anybody has a reason to change a password. The pharmacy history. The bank line. Every message in every thread with those 2 women for the last 2 years. Grady looked at the group chat, still open behind the call. There's a message thread, he said. From tonight. You're going to want it. Is it bad? I don't know what bad is anymore. Then send it and let me decide. A pause. Fourth thing, and this is the one people ignore. Do not sleep tonight. Not because you can't. Because I need you to spend tonight collecting, and by tomorrow morning there's going to be a deputy involved, and after that everything you touch has a chain of custody attached to it. Tonight is the last night. This is only yours. Understood. I'll be there at 7. Nadia. Yeah. If I'm wrong about this, if it's a bad prescription and a bad coincidence, and I'm a man having a breakdown in a hospital room, then we find that out quietly and nobody ever knows you asked. Her voice softened by exactly 1 degree, which for Nadia Brissett was a hug. But Grady, you've never once called me at 9 at night in 6 years. She hung up. Grady spent the next 4 hours with his phone plugged into the wall beside a sleeping child, screenshotting his own life. 14 months of pharmacy records, 26 months of bank statements. Every text thread with his wife going back to 2023. Every text thread with his mother-in-law. The group chat, captured in 9 overlapping images so that the timestamps overlapped and nothing could be argued about later. At 1:40 in the morning, Junie stirred and asked for water, and he gave her 4 chips of ice on a spoon because that was all she was allowed. "You're still here," she said. "Where would I be?" She thought about that, and it took her a while because she was 7 and full of anesthesia. "Dinner," she said, and went back to sleep. Grady sat very still in the dark. Then he opened the Notes app on his phone and started a list. He did not title it. He did not need to. The restaurant sat on the water at the bottom of the bay, all glass and warm light, the kind of place where the bread comes on a board and nobody says the word check. Dessa Kirchner had the seat facing the window. She always took the seat facing the window. Her mother sat across from her with her back straight and her hands folded, the way she sat everywhere, including church, including funerals. They were on their second bottle. The remains of dinner had been cleared an hour ago, and neither of them had suggested leaving. Petra asked about the gala. Corinne said, "I told her the second week of May. She wants to do the tent again." The tent was a disaster. The tent was memorable. "It rained into the soup, Mom. People still talk about it." Corinne turned her glass by the stem, a quarter turn, then another. On her wrist, a thin gold bracelet caught the candlelight. 2 charms hung from it. One was a small bird, a wren, worn smooth by 30 years of thumbs. The other was newer, brighter, a tiny sprig of juniper, still sharp at the edges, still catching light the way new gold does. That's what a gala is for. Not soup. Stories. Dessa laughed. It was a good laugh, low and easy. Half the room glanced over. "You're terrible." "I'm effective." Dessa's phone sat face up next to her water glass. It had been face up all night, which was its own kind of statement. It rang at 9:47. The screen said Munson Medical Center. Dessa looked at it. She did not pick it up. She let it ring twice and then turned it face down with 2 fingers, the way you'd flip a card you didn't want. "The hospital," she said. "He's got them calling me now. This is what he does. He gets other people to apply the pressure, so his hands stay clean. And 11 years of this. Everything is a project with him. Everything gets a folder." She reached for the bottle. "You know what he said to me last month? He said, 'I'm not angry, I'm just keeping track.' Who says that? Who talks like that to their wife?" The phone stopped ringing. 11 seconds later, Corinne's phone rang. Same number. The 2 women looked at each other across the candle. Corinne Kirchner was 63 years old. She had been a doctor's wife for 24 years and a doctor's widow for 14. She sat on the hospital's community advisory board. There was a bench outside the pediatric wing with her late husband's name on a brass plate. She answered it because she was a woman who answered things. "This is Corinne Kirchner." Her charity voice. Warm, unhurried, faintly amused. "Mrs. Kirchner, my name is Dr. Karen Halvorsen. I'm the pediatric surgeon who operated on your granddaughter this morning." "Yes, yes, of course. How is she?" "We've been beside ourselves." Across the table, Dessa mouthed something and rolled her hand in a circle. "Wrap it up. She's stable." Halvorsen said, "I'm not calling as her surgeon. I'm calling because Michigan law requires me to make certain notifications directly, and because I could not reach your daughter at this number." The pause was about a second and a half long. "I'm sorry," Corinne said. Notifications. Junie's comprehensive toxicology panel returned this evening. It contains findings that are not consistent with any medication she has ever been prescribed by any physician in her chart at any point in her life, in quantities that are not accidental. The restaurant went on around them. A server laughed at the bar. Somewhere a glass was set down on a stone counter. "That's not possible." I've notified Child Protective Services and the Antrim County Sheriff's Department. That happened at 8:50 this evening. There is a deputy at the family residence in Alden now. Halvorson's voice did not change temperature at any point. You are both asked to remain reachable tonight. An investigator will contact you. I'd advise you to answer. Doctor, I think there's been a mistake. Her father is under enormous stress, and he has been very fixated on this idea that somebody has to be to blame for a sick child, and I would be careful about how much weight you give a man in his state. Mrs. Kirchner, I don't think you're hearing what I said. This wasn't reported by her father. This was ordered by me and reported by me. Her father was never asked and was never informed. Silence. Good night, said Halvorson, and the call ended. Corinne lowered the phone slowly and set it on the tablecloth screen down and squared it with the edge of her placemat. Her hands were steady. Her hands were always steady. It was the one thing about her that never gave anything away, and Grady would later think that was because it was the only thing she had ever practiced. Dessa's smile was still on her face. It had been there when the call started and nobody had told it to leave. Mom. Corinne did not answer. Mom, what did they say? A server appeared at the table, young, cheerful, holding a small leather folder. Can I tempt either of you with dessert? The cherry crisp is really good tonight. Neither woman moved. Neither woman looked at him. The candle burned between them, and the water moved black outside the glass, and the young man stood there holding his folder for 4 full seconds. And later he would tell his girlfriend that it was the strangest table he had ever waited on, that it was like walking up to 2 statues. No, Corinne said. Thank you. He left. Corinne turned her head and looked at her daughter for the first time since the call began. When she spoke, her voice was perfectly calm and perfectly quiet, and there was something underneath it that had been buried for 31 years. What did you do? Dessa's smile finally went out. Don't, she said. That was all. One word. And her mother closed her mouth and looked at the tablecloth and did not ask again. 40 miles north, in room 412, Grady Vandermeier sat in the dark beside his daughter with his phone in his hand and a list on the screen and no idea yet that the machinery had already started to move. Junie made a small noise in her sleep. He reached over and put Pepper back under her arm where it had slipped. Outside, snow had started again over Traverse City, thin and dry, blowing sideways past the 4th-floor window. Nadia Brissett arrived at Munson at 6:52 in the morning with 2 coffees and a legal pad, and by 9 o'clock she had the insurance file. They sat in a family consultation room on the 4th floor with the door shut. It was a small beige box with a box of tissues on the table, and Grady understood exactly what the room was for and refused to give it the satisfaction. $400,000, Nadia said. She turned the page toward him. Term policy. Whole thing was done online. Opened 14 months ago, on the 9th of December. Grady looked at the date. December 9th. He tried to remember what had happened in the house that week, and could not. Beneficiary? Corinne Kirchner. He had known it was coming, and it still put a hand on his chest. Her grandmother. Sole beneficiary. Not you. Not Dessa. Not a trust. Nadia set her pen down, which was how she signaled that she was about to say something she had thought about carefully. Grady, I need you to hear the whole shape of this. A policy on a healthy child isn't a crime. People do it. Grandparents especially. $400,000 on a 7-year-old is high, but high isn't illegal. On its own, this piece of paper proves nothing. It's not on its own. No, it isn't. She tapped the corner of the page. Application submitted at 11:12 at night. That timestamp is going to matter eventually, so remember it. Grady sat back. The thing about being handed a fact you already expected is that it does not feel like information. It feels like confirmation, and confirmation is dangerous because it closes a door in the mind and hangs a sign on it. He thought about Corinne Kirchner. He thought about the way she had looked at his daughter across a Thanksgiving table with her hand under the child's chin. He thought about the charity, Ren's Wish, with its logo on tote bags all over 3 counties. He thought about the calm voice and the folded hands and the bracelet with 2 charms on it, and about the fact that Dessa had never in 13 years made a single decision without calling her mother first. It fit. It fit so well that Grady stopped looking. It's her, he said. It's been her the whole time. Des is a bystander who can't be bothered to look up from a wine list. Nadia watched him for a moment. Maybe, she said. You don't think so? I think it's early, and I think you just build a whole story out of one page, and I've watched better lawyers than me lose cases doing exactly that. She capped her pen. Bring me facts. Let the facts pick the person. Don't pick the person and go hunting for facts, because you will find them. People always do. Grady heard her. He agreed with her. And in the back of his mind, where the actual decisions get made, he had already convicted his mother-in-law. It would cost him 3 weeks, and very nearly cost him everything. The duplex in Mansalona had a plastic snowman on the porch that had fallen on its side in November and stayed that way. Grady knocked twice. He heard a television go quiet inside. Then nothing for so long that he had turned to go before the chain rattled. Ramona Estes opened the door 6 inches. She was 52, in a cardigan the color of oatmeal, with reading glasses pushed up in her hair and a dish towel in her hand. Mr. Vandermeer. Ramona, you should go. 2 minutes. You know what your family said about me? Her voice climbed and then came back down, and she looked over his shoulder at the street. Do you know what they told people? At the church, at the market, that I took a bracelet off that woman's dresser. 31 years I cleaned houses in this county, and I never had so much as a spoon go missing. And 8 months ago, I became a thief in a single afternoon. I know. You didn't know it then. That landed. Grady let it. No, he said. I didn't. I was told a story, and I believed the person who told it to me because she was my wife, and I've been believing her for a very long time about a lot of things. I'm here because 2 nights ago a surgeon took 11 inches of intestine out of my daughter and asked me if anyone was giving her something at home. Ramona went completely still. The dish towel stopped moving in her hands. Oh, she said. And then, softer, in a voice that had dropped 30 years, oh, that baby. She opened the door. The living room was small and immaculate and smelled like cinnamon. She made him sit. She poured coffee he did not ask for. She stood by the window with her arms crossed for almost a minute before she said anything at all. I didn't take anything from that house, she said. I took a picture. Of what? Junie's bathroom. The little one off her bedroom. Ramona pulled her phone out of her cardigan pocket and held it without unlocking it. I cleaned the house Tuesdays and Fridays for 2 years. That bathroom had a cup, a toothbrush, a bottle of pink shampoo with a mermaid on it, and a rubber duck she was too old for and wouldn't give up. What was there? Something that came from a pharmacy. Behind the cup, pushed back against the tile, with the label turned to the wall. She swallowed. I'd been in that room 80 times. I'd have noticed it before. It wasn't hers, and I know because I knew every single thing that child put in her mouth. I filled her pill organizer myself half the time. So you took a picture. I took a picture, and I texted it to your wife. Ramona's chin came up. I want to be clear about that. I did not go behind anybody's back. I sent it straight to her mother, and I wrote, I found this in Junie's bathroom. Is this something new from the doctor? Do you want me to move it somewhere safer? What did she say? Nothing. Ramona laughed once, with no humor in it at all. Not one word. For hours later she called me and told me a bracelet was missing and my services were no longer needed. And if I ever said anything about that family to anybody in this county, the police would be involved and I could explain it to them. The room was quiet. A clock ticked somewhere behind him. You still have it, Grady said. I have the picture, and I have every text I sent her, and I have the one she sent back 8 months ago telling me not to contact her again. Ramona finally sat down in the chair across from him and put the phone on the coffee table between them like it weighed something. You want to know why I kept it? Because I have a granddaughter that age. And because I laid awake that whole first week telling myself that if something ever happened to that little girl, I wanted to be able to prove I said something. That's an ugly reason. I know it is. I should have gone to somebody. I told myself it wasn't my family, and it wasn't my business, and they'd have believed her over me anyway. They would have, Grady said. That doesn't make it right. No. But it makes it true, and I'm not here to make you feel worse than you already do. She looked at him for a long moment. You've changed, she said. You used to be a nice man who was very tired. Send me everything, Grady said. She sent it there in front of him. Photograph, timestamp, message thread, all of it, and he watched each item land on his own screen and felt the stone behind his ribs settle another inch. He was standing at the door with his hand on the storm handle when she said the thing that changed the direction of the whole story. "There's one more thing. I don't know if it means anything. Tell me." The Tuesday before I got let go, the old woman was in the kitchen. Mrs. Kirchner. Ramona's hands twisted in the dish towel again. She was standing at the sink with her back to me, and I don't think she knew I'd come in. "She was talking to your wife, and she was upset. I never once saw that woman upset. And she said, this is exactly how it started with Ren." Grady's hand stopped on the handle. "Who is Ren?" Ramona blinked at him. "You don't know? I've been in that family for 13 years, and I have never heard that name in my life." "Mr. Vandermeer." She said it slowly, carefully, like a woman stepping onto ice. "Ren was your wife's little sister. She came on day 3. She came at 11 in the morning when the shift change was on and the hallway was full of nurses, and Grady understood the timing before she was through the door. She wore the gray sweater. It was cashmere, and it was 3 years old, and he had bought it for her in Petoskey the winter Junie turned 4, and she had worn it to exactly nothing since. She wore it now. "Oh, God," she said from the doorway. "Oh, my baby." She crossed the room fast. She got down beside the bed on her knees and took Junie's hand in both of hers and put her forehead against the blanket, and her shoulders shook, and she made a sound like something tearing. It was, Grady thought, watching from the chair by the window, the single finest piece of work he had ever seen a human being do. "Hi, Mom," Junie said. 3 days out from surgery, the child's first instinct was to comfort the adult. "I'm here now. I'm here. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. It's okay." "It is not okay, sweetheart. Don't you say that." The nurse in the doorway, a young one named Kelsey, watched with her hand over her mouth for a second before she backed out and pulled the door half shut. Dessa cried for 4 minutes. Then she stood up, wiped her face with the heel of her hand, and turned to Grady. The turn was the part he would think about later. There was a half-second in the turn, a place where the face reset, like a screen refreshing. "Can we talk in the hall?" They stood by the window at the end of the corridor. Down below, a plow was working the lot in long, slow passes. "My phone died," she said. "Okay." "It died at the restaurant, Grady, and the charger was in my other bag, and by the time I got home there was a police car in my driveway and a woman from the state asking me questions in my own kitchen at 11 o'clock at night." Her voice cracked in exactly the right place. "Do you have any idea what that was like?" "That sounds hard." "It was Wendland. The account. It's 12% of the resort's annual, and they flew in from Chicago, and it was set 6 weeks ago, and I sat there the entire dinner thinking about her, and when I read your message I thought, he's got it, he's there, he's better at that than I am." She was warming up now. She had found the version she liked. "And I know how that sounds. I know. I'm going to hear it in my head for the rest of my life. And then my mother says that thing, that awful thing about it being everybody's problem. She was trying to protect me, Grady, that's how she is. She gets defensive and it comes out sideways, and I know it looked monstrous." Grady looked out the window at the plow. Here is where he made his choice. Every part of him that was still a husband wanted to open his mouth. He had the pharmacy log in his pocket. He had a photograph from a fired cleaning woman. He had a dead child's name he had learned 9 hours ago from a stranger in Mansalona. He could have laid it all on the windowsill and watched her face come apart, and it would have felt, for about 6 seconds, like the best thing that had ever happened to him. And then she would have called a lawyer, and every password in that house would have changed by dinner. 6 seconds. That was the trade. 6 seconds of satisfaction against everything. Grady Vandermeer had spent his whole life around trees. You cannot argue with a cherry tree. You cannot rush one. You prune in the cold, months before anything shows, and you wait, and the tree does what you shaped it to do in a season that has not arrived yet. He turned around and let his shoulders come down. "I overreacted," he said. Dessa blinked. "What?" "That night. The picture, sending it to everybody, all of it. I'd been up since 4. I watched them wheel her in. I was out of my mind." He rubbed his eyes with his thumb and forefinger, which was true, because he had not slept in 50 hours. "I shouldn't have put it in the group chat. That was me trying to make somebody feel it with me." Her whole body changed. He watched the tension leave her arms. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you for saying that. And this doctor, he shook his head slowly. Halvorson. She's got a theory, and she's decided the whole family's guilty of something. She asked me if we'd been giving her things. Like we're animals. She said the same thing to me. Dessa grabbed his forearm with both hands. Grady, she was so cold about it. And the state woman kept asking who handles the medication, and who's in the house, and I said, our families are in the house, that's what a family is. It'll wash out. The panel's probably contaminated, or she's got a bad lab. That's exactly what my mother said. Yeah, said Grady. I bet she did. Dessa hugged him. He put his arms around his wife and looked over her shoulder at the closed door of room 412, where his daughter was sleeping, and his face did not change at all. That afternoon she relaxed. And people who relax make mistakes. Over the next 11 days, she made 4 of them. And Grady wrote every one down in a green cloth ledger at his kitchen table at night, in his father's handwriting, which was also his own. The dockside in Bel Air had 6 stools, a jukebox nobody had fed in years, and a smell of fryer oil that got into your coat. Ansel Kirchner was at the far end with a beer he had been nursing so long the glass had gone cloudy. Grady sat down 2 stools away and ordered a coffee, which the bartender found funny. You left the chat, Grady said. Ansel did not look up. He was 41 and looked 50. He had his mother's straight nose and none of her spine. Yeah, 9 people stayed in it. You left. I want to know why. Does it matter? It's the only decent thing anyone in your family did that night, so yes. Ansel turned the glass in a slow circle on the bar. His hands were shaking, and it was not from the beer, because he had barely touched it. Because of the picture, he said. What about it? You ever been in my mother's hallway? Upstairs, between the bathroom and the linen closet. Ansel finally looked over. His eyes were wet and red. There's a photograph on that wall. It's been there since 1994. School picture. Little girl in a yellow shirt. 9 years old. Taken about 3 weeks before she died. My sister Ren. Nobody has ever said that name to me. No, they wouldn't. Ansel laughed, wrecked. I opened your message on my phone at my kitchen table, and I looked at Junie's face, and I have walked past that hallway picture 40,000 times in my life, and it was the same face. The same color. That gray. I put the phone down and I threw up in my own sink, and then I left the chat because I couldn't look at it anymore. The bartender put the coffee down. Neither man touched it. What happened to Ren? Heart condition. That's what's on the stone. That's what's on the funeral card. He said it flatly, the way a man recites something he has repeated so many times it has stopped meaning anything. She got sick in the spring, she got better, she got sick again, she got better, and then in October she didn't. How old were you? 9. Same as her. We were 11 months apart. Ansel rubbed his face with both hands. Dessa was 12. Grady waited. There's something else, isn't there? He said. Ansel's shoulders came up around his ears. I need you to understand my situation, he said. My mother owns my marina. 2 years ago, I was 70,000 under and about to lose the whole thing, and she paid it, and she has never once let me forget it. She calls it a loan. There's no paperwork on it. There's just her telling me what it means whenever she wants something. What did she want you to do? Drive. Drive where? Bel Air. Twice. The pharmacy out on the highway, not the one in town. Ansel's voice dropped to almost nothing. She'd call and say she needed a favor and could I pick Junie up from school and swing by and get a bag under her name. Junie loved it. We'd get a slush after. I did not look in the bag, Grady. I swear to God. I never once looked in the bag. Grady put both hands flat on the bar and kept them there. I need the dates. Ansel scrolled his phone with a shaking thumb and read them off, and Grady wrote them in his notebook in small square handwriting. The dates matched the pharmacy log exactly. 2 of them. There's a name on the label, Ansel said. I saw it on the second one when the bag was on the seat. I didn't think about it for 1.5 years. And then 2 nights ago I did. Whose name? Ansel looked at him. The prescribing doctor, he said. It said he, Kirchner, M.D. The bar hummed. Your father, Grady said. My father died in 2011. Nadia confirmed it in under a day. Dr. Emmett Kirchner, pediatrician, Antrim County, beloved, deceased. His federal prescriber number had never been properly retired in a national chain system. 14 years after the man was buried, his credentials were still sitting in a database, valid, unwatched, waiting for someone in that house who knew the number by heart. Grady sat in his truck outside the bar for 20 minutes without starting the engine. It fit. God, it fit. Corinne had been the doctor's wife. Corinne would know that number. Corinne had the bracelet and the charity and the calm voice and the dead daughter nobody was allowed to mention. It fit so perfectly that he never once asked himself the only question that mattered. Who else in that house had grown up watching their father write prescriptions at the kitchen table? She came to the orchard on a Sunday in March, unannounced, in a silver sedan with salt up the sides. Grady was in the equipment barn sharpening pruning blades. He heard the car and did not come out, and after a minute she came in a wool coat and good boots, picking her way around a hydraulic hose like it was a snake. "You've been avoiding my calls?" "I have. May I sit?" "There's a milk crate." Corinne Kirchner sat on a milk crate in a $900 coat, and Grady kept sharpening, and the sound of the stone on the blade filled the barn. She talked for 11 minutes. She talked about how families are complicated. She talked about how Dessa had been fragile since she was young and how nobody understood the pressure she was under. She talked about a therapist in Ann Arbor, a very good one, discreet. She talked about the cost of what was coming, the lawyers, the years, what it does to a child to sit in a courtroom and hear about herself. She talked about a number, and the number was substantial, and it came with conditions that were never stated out loud but were perfectly clear. "No reports," she said. "No lawyers. No strangers with clipboards. Junie stays where she belongs in this family, with people who love her." Grady tested the blade edge with his thumb. "You married into something that takes care of its own," Corinne said. "That's not a threat, Grady. That's an offer. It's the same offer this family has made to everyone who ever came into it, and every single one of them was smart enough to take it." He set the blade down. "What's the second charm?" Corinne's chin moved a fraction. "I'm sorry. On your bracelet. You've worn that bird as long as I've known you. There's a second one now." "What is it?" She glanced at her wrist. Her thumb went to it, automatically, the way a person touches a scar. "It's a juniper," she said. "For Junie." "That's nice. When did you get it?" "When she was born." The pause before she said it was about 2 seconds long. In a barn, in March, with the wind pushing at the door, 2 seconds is an enormous amount of time. "She was born in June," Grady said. "You bought that charm in December. The 9th of December, 14 months ago, at Rasmussen's in Traverse City, for $420. He picked up a rag and wiped his hands, one finger at a time. "I know because you charged it to Ren's Wish Foundation, and it's sitting in your public expense filing under office supplies." The wind moved the door on its track. Corinne Kirchner sat on the milk crate and looked at him, and for the first time in 13 years, Grady saw the woman underneath the voice. She was not afraid. That was the thing that unsettled him for weeks afterward. She looked more than anything tired in a way that goes back decades. "Get off my property," he said. She stood up. She smoothed her coat. She walked to the door and put her hand on the frame, and then she turned around, and she said the sentence that took Grady Vandermeier apart. "You think you're protecting her from me." She got in the car and drove down the gravel between the bare rows, and Grady stood in the doorway of the barn with a rag in his hand and cold air coming in off 300 acres. And for the first time since the bathroom floor, he did not know what he was looking at. The farmhouse outside Ellsworth sat at the end of a 2-track with a wood stove going and a dog that had stopped barking years ago. Fay Locke was 71. She opened the door before Grady knocked, which meant she had watched him come up the drive. "You're the son-in-law," she said. "Grady Vandermeier. I know your name. I've known it since the wedding announcement in 2013. She stepped back. "Wipe your feet." The kitchen was hot from the stove. She poured 2 cups of tea nobody drank and sat down across from him. 31 years, she said. "That's how long I've been waiting for somebody to drive up that road. Nobody told me you existed." "No. I'm the crazy one." That's the story. Curran's poor bitter sister who never had children of her own and couldn't stand to see anyone else happy. Fay's mouth twisted. "I've had that said about me at my own mother's funeral." She got up and went into the back and came out with a shoebox. It was blue, from a brand that had not existed since the 90s, and the corners were soft from handling. She took the lid off and did not touch anything inside it. "Ren's records," she said. "Every page. 1994. 6 letters I wrote to the county, all of them copies, because I've never sent an original of anything in my life. Her funeral card. And that. That was a photograph curled at one edge. Two girls on a dock in summer. The smaller one was maybe 9, gap-toothed, squinting into the sun in a yellow shirt, with her arms straight out for balance. Behind her, at the end of the dock, a taller girl of 12 stood with her hands behind her back, not squinting at all, looking directly into the camera. Grady looked at the 12-year-old for a long time. I reported my sister in 1994, Faye said. I sat in an office in Bel Air and told a man in a cardigan that something was being done to that child. And he wrote maybe 6 words on a pad, and 2 weeks later I got a letter thanking me for my concern. Corinne was a doctor's wife. Emmett Kirchner had delivered half that county. Who was I? They buried her. They buried her in November, and there was a policy, and it paid. And by the following spring there was a foundation named after her with my sister's face on the brochure. Faye's hands closed into fists on the table. And I have hated her for 31 years for killing that little girl. She stopped. Grady looked up. You said hated, he said. Past tense. Faye Locke looked at the shoebox for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice had gone thin. I've had 31 years to be honest about what I actually saw, she said. And it took me 20 of them to admit I'd rearranged it, because the truth was too ugly to hold. I always said I thought Corinne did it. She raised her eyes. But it was Dessa I saw at the sink. The stove ticked. What? August of that year. I came in through the side door, because nobody in that house ever locked anything. Corinne was outside in the garden, and Dessa was standing at the kitchen sink with her sister's cup in her hand and something else in the other hand, and she was 12 years old, and she looked up at me. Faye's chin trembled, and then went still, and she did not jump. Mr. Vandermeer, a child who was caught, jumps. She just looked at me, and she put the cup down and she said, Hi, Aunt Faye. Do you want lemonade? Grady could not speak. I told Corinne that night, and I watched my sister's face do something I have never seen a human face do before or since. She went absolutely calm. Faye wiped her eyes with the back of her wrist, angrily. And that was the moment. Right there. That's the crime nobody's ever charged her with. She had a choice in that kitchen in August of 1994, and she chose the family name, and 11 weeks later Ren was dead, and my sister has been managing the aftermath every day since. It rearranged everything. Grady sat in that hot kitchen with the tea going cold in front of him and felt his entire theory collapse and reassemble in a different shape. She's alive. Stop making her everyone's problem. He had read that as cruelty. It was not cruelty. It was a woman who had done this once before, 31 years ago, and who was doing it again, and who wanted the noise to stop. You think you're protecting her from me. Corinne had not been taunting him in that barn. She had been telling him he was aiming at the wrong person, and she could not say it plainly, because saying it plainly would have ended her too. The bracelet. 2 charms. A wren, worn smooth by 30 years of thumbs. And a juniper, bought in December, 14 months ago, the same month a policy was opened on a 7-year-old. Not a trophy. A tally. Corinne Kirchner had known what was starting again, and she had bought a charm for it, and she had charged it to a charity named after the first one. Mrs. Locke. Grady's voice came out strange. Is any of this still possible? Legally. It was 31 years ago. You'd have to ask a lawyer. I'm asking you first. Faye reached into the shoebox and slid out a single sheet, an autopsy summary with a signature at the bottom. There was a medical examiner, she said. Devereaux. He didn't like it either. He didn't like it enough that he wrote in his own file that the case remained open pending further information, which nobody asked him to do, and which meant that when he retained tissue from that child, the county was required to keep it. Her finger tapped the page. He died in 2009, but he made sure that box stayed on a shelf. He's been waiting 31 years too. Grady drove back to Alden through a spring rain with a blue shoebox belted into the passenger seat like a person. Nadia Brissette met him at his kitchen table at 10 at night, read the autopsy summary twice, and set it down very carefully, as if it might go off. Michigan has no statute of limitations on murder, she said. None. Not one day. So we have 2. We have 2 cases 31 years apart, in the same house, with the same pattern, and one of them is preserved tissue. She took off her glasses. Grady, I've prosecuted 140 felonies. I have never once seen a case build itself like this. It didn't build itself, Grady said. It's been sitting on a shelf for 31 years waiting for somebody to be angry enough to go get it. Nadia filed it as one package, and the thing that made it devastating was that almost none of it was dramatic. It was paperwork, the toxicology panel, ordered by a surgeon who did not know the family and had nothing to gain. The photograph from a fired cleaning woman, with a timestamp, next to the text message it was attached to and the termination that followed 4 hours later. 14 months of pharmacy records under a dead pediatrician's prescriber number. The 2 dates a brother-in-law drove a child to pick up her own poison and bought her a slush afterward. The insurance application, submitted at 11:12 at night from the router in the Vandermeer house. On an evening Corinne Kirchner was in a hotel in Chicago with a receipt to prove it. Ren Kirchner's 1994 chart laid beside Grady Vandermeier's 2025 chart, the abnormal values highlighted in the same color on both, 31 years apart, looking like photocopies of each other. And Exhibit 14. At 8:52 on the night of the surgery, a nurse named Dolores had held a hospital phone up to a 7-year-old who had woken for the second time that day and asked for her mother. The child had left a voicemail. It was 19 seconds long. It said, "Mom, it's me. I'm okay. My tummy hurts a lot, but I'm okay. You don't have to come if you're busy." The call was never returned. It was placed 19 minutes before Dessa Kirchner declined dessert. When Nadia played it in a conference room in Bel Air for the county prosecutor, a woman with 2 grown sons, the prosecutor got up and stood facing the corner of the room for a while with her hand over her mouth, and then sat back down and said, in a completely level voice, "Charge both of them." The arrest was on a Tuesday. The arraignment was on a Thursday. And in June, 3 days before the trial was set to begin, Dessa Kirchner took a plea. Not the one anyone expected. She pleaded to the attempted murder of her daughter and accepted 22 years. And in exchange, she refused to give the state one word about 1994. No statement. No testimony. Nothing that touched her mother. Nadia was furious in the hallway outside the courtroom. She just bought Corinne out of a murder charge, she said. 31 years, and it dies right there because we cannot make a case on the Ren file without her, and she knows it. Grady watched people move past them toward the elevators. "I know," he said. "You knew she'd do it. I've watched that woman call her mother before every decision she's ever made, including which car to buy." He shrugged one shoulder. "She was always going to protect her. It's the only loyal thing in her." "Then why do you look like a man who won something?" Because Grady had never expected to put Corinne Kirchner in a prison cell. He had spent Act 2 aiming at the wrong woman, and when he found out he was wrong, he had not thrown the work away. He had simply pointed it somewhere else. All those weeks digging through Ren's Wish Foundation had produced a separate file that had nothing to do with poison at all, a $420 charm charged as office supplies. 9 years of an administrative fee drawn quietly from the trust Grady's own father had left to his granddaughter. 11 other line items that a forensic accountant took apart in 2 weeks. The state charged Corinne Kirchner with embezzlement, fraud, and misappropriation of charitable assets. She was 63. She got probation and restitution and a felony record. She lost the foundation, dissolved by court order. She lost the marina, sold to cover restitution, which meant she lost the last thing she held over her son. She lost the house in Alden. And on the day her daughter was sentenced, she sat in the 3rd row of an Antrim County courtroom in a navy coat and listened to a prosecutor read into the public record, for the first time in 31 years, the name of the child she had buried in 1994. Ren Kirchner, age 9, October 1994. Every person in that room turned to look at her. That was the sentence Grady wanted. Not a cell. A town. 900 people, one blinking light. A market where everybody knows exactly who you are and what a jury said about your books and what a prosecutor said about your first daughter. Corinne Kirchner would live another 20 years in Antrim County, and she would never again walk into a room where the story got there after she did. In the hallway, Nadia was still looking at him. "You built the second case before you even needed it." "I built it when I still thought she was the one doing it." Grady picked up his coat. "Turned out she was doing something else. It's still a file." Junie came home in April. The green pages came back slowly. 1 in the first week, then 2, then a Thursday and a Friday together, and then, in the middle of May, an entire week of green, 7 pages in a row, and Grady found the notebook open on the kitchen counter and had to go stand in the mudroom with his hand over his mouth for a while. She gained 11 pounds by summer. Pepper's ear needed one more repair, and Grady did it at the kitchen table in 8 minutes. And Junie said he was getting good at it, and he said he'd had practice. He signed the house in Alden over to Faye Locke. She fought him about it on her own porch for 20 minutes. I don't want that woman's house. It isn't hers. It was mine before the marriage. That's why nobody could touch it. Then it's yours. I don't want it either. Nothing happened to my daughter in this orchard. He put the keys on her porch rail. 31 years ago, you told the truth to a county that decided you were nobody. I'm not able to give you 1994 back, Mrs. Locke. This is what I've got. Faye Locke stood on her porch and cried in front of a man she had met twice. The court dissolved Ren's wish and moved what was left of its assets into a children's advocacy fund in the county and named Faye to administer it. Grady refused to sit on the board. He would not take $1 of it, and he would not let $1 of it near Junie. Money that came out of that family was not going to buy his daughter so much as a pair of shoes. Ansel testified for the state about the 2 drives and the pharmacy bag. He was forgiven by nobody, including himself. He sold what was left of his life in Antrim County and moved to Ohio in August, and he sent Junie a birthday card in June every year after that, and Grady never once threw one away and never once let her open one. The letter came in February, a year out. It had a return address at the Huron Valley Correctional Facility in Ypsilanti and his name on it in handwriting he had known for 13 years. Grady read it on the porch with the orchard going pink behind him and the first warm wind of the year coming up off the lake. For pages, front and back, she wrote that she was sick. She wrote that she had been sick since she was a girl and that nobody had ever helped her. She wrote about a therapist and a program and a workbook. She wrote about her mother, and about a kitchen in 1994, and about what it does to a 12-year-old when the one adult who sees her decides to look away. Some of it was probably even true. On the last page, she asked for one thing, and she used one word for it, and the word was forgiveness. The screen door banged. Dad. Junie came out with Pepper under one arm. She was 9 now, and tall, and her hair had gone back to being thick, and she moved like a kid who had stopped expecting her body to fail her. Who's that from? Grady folded the pages once, along the crease that was already there. Nobody who lives here, he said. Okay. She looked out at the rows. Can I have the green pencil? Mine's down to nothing. Top drawer. Thanks. The door banged again. Grady sat for a minute in the wind. Then he went inside to the desk in the back room and took out the green cloth ledger his father had used for 40 years, and he tore a single clean sheet from the back of it, and he uncapped a pen. He thought about a green page on a bathroom floor. He thought about 11 people reading a photograph and 9 of them saying nothing. He thought about a voicemail 19 seconds long that nobody returned. He wrote 3 words. I understand. Thanks. He folded it, sealed it, addressed it, and walked it down the long gravel drive between the rows with the trees coming into blossom on both sides of him, white and heavy and loud with bees. He put it in the mailbox at the road and raised the flag. Then he walked back up toward the house, where his daughter was sitting at the kitchen table with a green pencil, filling in a whole page, edge to edge. He did not look back once. There was nothing behind him that needed watching anymore.